Baruch HaShem. So really, how you guys doing? How's the weather where you're at? It's kind of warm here today. With God's help, we're going to try to pick up where we left off last week. You might know that as, I guess, Thursday night. A couple days ago. It's pretty interesting how I think I was about to start talking about the history of the Amalek Empire when the sound cut out. Rabbi Reuven went over it in a lecture in the description. There's a link in there. Last two Torah portions have been pretty awesome. There's just piles and piles of stuff in there. Every single week there's proof. Just mountains and mountains of evidence. Just so ridiculous how how blind people are. People can like read the 5 books of Moses and just come up with whatever's in their own head. Just think whatever nonsense. This week is Parashat Shoftim. You're probably here for Amalek though. You want to know how to survive the war of Gog and Magog. Like I was talking about in the first part of the stream. Most of the stuff, and Rabbi Reuven, of course, mentions it. Most of the stuff people look for is not what they need. They're looking for like band-aids and prescription pills for the problems in their life and how to survive the end of the world. What we need to do is figure out how to do some hard work so we may live. And it's really not that hard. Not the basic stuff. Just we tell ourselves it's too hard, so we listen to the Satan, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, and his lies, telling us everything is just too hard. So we just won't do anything. Oh yeah, I was gonna say a couple of the easiest ways to tell who Amalek is. Like aside from like the character traits and stuff like that I mentioned in the last stream, is as far as a nation, like a country, there are no more nations anymore. There's two. there's the nation of Israel, not the state, but the people, Israel, the Jews, and then there's all the mishmash mud people, the 70 nations, the Goyim, where no one knows which is which anymore. But as far as countries go, it's super easy to tell who Amalek is, who Edom is. It's always a country that either goes against the Jews or hosts the Jews. Wherever the most Jews are, that is where Edom. That is Edom. Especially in the last like 1,000+ years. At first, it was just whoever attacked the Jews. But now that they're in the exile, it's pretty much wherever they're at. That is Edom. That's just how God works it. It's, doesn't make a lot of sense to our pea brains. Oh, we're Edom? That's kind of odd. At least, if you live in America, that's where the most Jews are. So I guess we're Edom. We live in the nation of the Amalekites. Rabbi Reuven gives a good history on a very brief history. For anyone that's into history, you can dig way deep to find all the details that he talks about. We'll try to go over a little bit of it, but the Roman Empire spread out and took over most of the known world, and then man, that screen is bright. Took over most of the known world. Pretty much all of Europe and Eastern Europe, Middle East, and North Africa. When they stretched themselves a little too thin and just suddenly, for no reason collapsed. And all kinds of people will tell you it was, because they spread themselves too thin, which is one reason. But the thing I never put together till Rabbi Reuven mentioned it is all the nations that follow this pattern, like Egypt and all the other nations that went against the Jews, they all have the same common denominator. They rise to massive power and they become so debased and corrupted by their own desires that they literally crumble from the inside. Other than Egypt, God didn't let Egypt get that far. He had to get his nation out first. And that required some plagues and other stuff. But the key to surviving the end of days is we have to learn Torah and we have to apply it to our lives. We have to get to the point where we aren't looking for people who, to tell us who Amalek is or who was the army of Gog or, any of that stuff. We have to know for ourselves, like, those people are evil, stay away from them. These people are good. I need to get as close to them as humanly possible. We have to be able, and the only way to do that is by learning the 5 books of Moses, the commentary by the Jewish sages, because the Goyim have absolutely no answers. And it says so in the prophets, in the book of Jeremiah. In the end of days, all the goyim are going to come and say, our forefathers lied to us. We inherited falsehood. So we can either learn now and do our best to figure it out to get as far and close as we can towards God and towards the truth, or most likely, if not, you'll be either in the army of Gog and Magog, or I don't want you to be in the army of Gog and Magog. I don't want you to die in the war. But those are the options. I don't, I have no idea who's going to listen to this, or who's, even finer still, who's going to understand or believe or make the effort to find out if what I'm saying is correct. God, just let us help one more person see the truth. Get a little bit closer to you. That's all that matters. People shouldn't be looking for prophecy unless it's to scare us to death, to light a fire under us, to drive us to keep learning and applying what we learn with God's help. That's the only point. That's what the sages say. The only point of Torah learning is so that we should fear God and do what He says. I'll show you guys a secret that I learned a while back this year, or I think it was last year. You want blessings? Bless the Jews. Bless God's nation. The 5 books of Moses says it multiple times. God says it first to Abraham in the book of Genesis. I will bless those who bless you. And then, oddly enough, we learn this again in the book of Numbers, chapter 24, when the wicked Bilam, the prophet of the Goyim, he does his best to try to curse the Jews, but he just cannot. God won't let him do it. The sages say he tries. I forget. I think he tries 3 times, and after one of the times he learns it's not working, so he tries to curse them through how he blesses them. I mean, it still doesn't really work. And he took up his discourse and said, the speech of Bilam, son of Beor, and the speech of the man whose eyes are open, the saying of him that hears the words of God and knows the knowledge of the Most High, seeing the vision of the Almighty, falling down by having his eyes open. I see it, but not now. I behold it, but it is not near. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab, and destroy all the children of Shet. And Edom shall be his possession. Seir also his enemies shall be his possession, and Israel shall do valiantly. Out of Jacob shall come a ruler, and he shall destroy him that remains of the city. This is talking about the real Mashiach. The one, when he comes, there will be no doubts. Will speak and destroy people with his words. Just smell people and be able to smell whether they're righteous or wicked. He'll be able to smell the sins on a person. And when he looked on Amalek, he took up his discourse and said, Amalek was the first of the nations, but his latter end shall be everlasting perdition. And he looked on the Kni and took up his discourse and said, strong is thy dwelling place. You put your nest in a rock. Nevertheless, Cain shall be wasted. Man, what is a weird translation? Let's talk about last week's Torah portion. This isn't going anywhere with the Amalek nonsense. I like to talk about verses that are commonly distorted by people. I found one this last week, I guess, in Parashat Ray, Deuteronomy, Book of Deuteronomy, chapter 12, verse 8 and 9. You shall not do after all the things that we do here this day, every man whatever is right in his own eyes. A lot of people hear like verses like that and just think, I can just do whatever, whatever I think is right, as long as I believe in God, and I can just do whatever. That just doesn't make any kind of sense whatsoever, though. This passage is referring to the conditions of bringing sacrifices on an altar. And this verse, like these two verses specifically, are dealing with like a really specific, rare occurrence of the time between when the tabernacle was and when in the desert, and the time when they crossed over the Jordan, and the establishment of the tabernacle at Shiloh. There was 14 years where the nation of Israel took 14 years to conquer the land of Canaan, the Canaanites, and then apportion all the lands to settle it. And so they had a unique situation where they could bring personal, like, thanksgiving and free will offerings on their own personal altars. But there was still one central altar in a few different places during those 14 years that was used for sin offerings, sin and guilt offerings. That's why it says every man what is right in his own eyes. Commentators say, there's Rashi says, vows and every man what is right in his own eyes, vows and free will offerings which you dedicate because it is pleasing in your own eyes to bring them, and not because of an obligation imposed upon you, such as you may offer on Bamas. That's the earthen, like individual personal earthen altar, but not sacrifices that are to be offered in consequence of an obligation like a sin or a guilt offering. There's one last week and this week, I think, that I've found is like a glaring stab in the eye for the New Testament not being true. It is gods which you or your forefathers have not known. There is so much. There's so much in the 5 books of Moses that people just, most people just don't even read. Like I used to not read. And what I did, I would just glance through and use my own nonsense to decide what it meant, and not really think about anything. What I finally learned from Rabbi Reuven is the reason why, like the most critical reason why. There's a couple of them, but like what he says is the foundation. And the foundation to be able to see and accept the truth is not wasting the spiritual sustenance that God gives a person. For a man, that is not wasting seed. Whether it's by yourself or with another human being. Any act that doesn't at least have the potential to create life is wasting seed. Like if you watch filth and pornography and who knows what else, or you just think about some disgusting image that you have in your head when you're all alone, or with someone else, or if you're with someone else, and use what people commonly refer to as protection, quote, or birth control of any kind, pretty much. That's wasting seed. And for a woman, it's dressing and acting, for both men and women, dressing and acting immodestly, but for the dress and behavior is a little more severe for a woman. When a person does that, and they literally just destroy all the good that God wants to give them. The next is our desires, and like aside from lusts of physicality, like our character traits, those are the next block to accepting the truth. Oh yeah, Baruch Hashem, I forgot. See if I can navigate our way there. At the end of there's just an awesome section. I hope I wrote the commentary down. At the end of chapter 30 in Deuteronomy, God really hates trees, but not as much as he hates, as we find out this week, not as much as he hates stone pillars. The end of Deuteronomy chapter 12, Moses rebukes the people and admonishes them against, warning them against being ensnared by idolatry. In verse 30, take heed to yourself lest you be ensnared into following them after they are destroyed from before you, unless you seek after their gods, saying, how do these nations serve their gods? Even so, I will do the same. And the commentators say, Rashi says, after you saw God destroy them, you should have learned that there was nothing to be learned from them. Al-Sheikh says, this wouldn't have been a problem for the early generations, first few after they settled the land, that heard the stories from the people that, saw all the idols destroyed and that they were powerless. But people unfamiliar with the past might be tempted to resurrect the ancient practices of the natives. It just really reminded me of all the people trying to dig up nonsense false gods and false religions of the past, like a lot of the based in red pill guys that don't like Jews. Like the Norse pantheon of idol worship. My thought was always before I learned any Torah, my thought was always, it's so long ago and dead that no one would, even if it had any truth to it, no one would know how to do it right because it's, lost to the dust. Now that I know a little something, I know that there is only one God, there's only one truth. And it is certainly not Yodin or what any other natural forces with human faces. All the stuff that people used to ascribe to different gods, different trees, mountains, wind, water, the weather, the sun, the moon, the stars, all that stuff. Those are all forces that the one and only true God of Israel controls, because he made and controls everything. And the things that they worship, there's stuff there. A lot of the time, there's angels behind all these forces that God uses as like a celestial or spiritual intermediary to fulfill his will. But they are most certainly not God. Not at all. Oh, here it is. This is awesome. After the passage about destruction of the commandment to destroy all the idols, destroy the Asher trees. God does not like trees anywhere associated with anything to do with worship. Not at all. No. Like, go and do a search on any anywhere online where it has the Old Testament, the 5 books of Moses. You'll even find it a lot in the prophets, especially in the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah is commanded with rebuking the nation for their return to these Asher trees. Jeremiah really lays it out crystal clear what these trees really are today, for the last few hundred years anyway. But there are so many times where God and Moses mention, like, destroy the Asher trees. When you go into the land of Canaan, make sure to uproot the trees and chop them down and burn them and destroy everything and rip out their roots, because every shred of evidence that they ever existed must absolutely be completely eviscerated. Because in the land of Canaan, all the 7 nations that live there, they would, like, pretty much everywhere there was a giant tree and everywhere there was a mountain, they would set up some idol and worship there. And now millions of people that call themselves Christians and millions of people that say they don't believe in God whatsoever, probably even more than the Christians, they all buy a Christmas tree every single year and they stick it in their house. And they read Jeremiah chapter 10. That's all I got to say. Read Jeremiah chapter 10 and just look at what he's saying. Read it over and over and over again if you have to. It took me a while to find all the amazing stuff in there. I go over like a year or two, reading it about 4, 5, 10, 20 times. But it is endless. A woodsman with an axe chops down a tree from the forest and fixes it with the nails and a hammer so it does not totter. It needs to be carried because it cannot walk. He decks it with silver and gold. Like a scarecrow in a cucumber patch. You should not fear it, because it cannot harm you, and neither is it in it to do you any good. Well, right after this passage on idolatry is chapter 13 in the book of Deuteronomy. It opens with, "You shall not add to the law, and you shall not subtract from it," which is probably one of the most used and most distorted verses by the Christians of the Old Testament, at least in the 5 books of Moses anyway. I won't get into Isaiah 53 right now. But the commentary in the Art Scroll Chumash says the Torah is perfect and complete. Although non-Jewish printers of the Chumash, which is the 5 books of Moses with commentary, began a new chapter here in chapter 13 of the book of Deuteronomy, the Masoretic markings indicate this is not correct, since verse 1 is actually part of the previous passage in Torah scrolls. You can go and look all this stuff up and verify it for yourself. The Goyim had no clue what they were doing. None at all. And this isn't the first time where they screwed up the making a chapter at the wrong part at the end of a passage, or like not at the end of a passage, like in the, they were close, they missed it by 1 verse. The passage is actually supposed to start in verse 2, talking about false prophets and dreamers. There's a neat, super awesome weapon to fight lies and evil. And I learned a while back, I can't remember the sage's name. I learned this from Rabbi Reuven. One of the sages in the Talmud says, any place that heretics and idol worshippers use as a verse from the Torah, from the 5 books of Moses, as a tool to support their heresy or their idolatry, always close by, there is a weapon against their lies, a weapon of truth to chop their garbage down and burn it like an asher tree. And if, the amazing thing is the weapon of the heretics that you shall not add to the law and you shall not subtract to it is hidden, hidden in between idolatry, a commandment to just uproot and eviscerate idolatry, and a warning against false prophets. The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 13, verse 2 through 6, talks about false prophets and dreamers. Anyone that will come to get you to stray from the truth, like Jesus. Let us go and worship the gods of others, gods that you did not know, you or your forefathers. Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 7. You guys know what that means? They wouldn't ever think about any of this stuff. They wouldn't ever use their head for anything other than, like, how can I commit more evil? How can I commit more sins? How can I fulfill my own desires? The verse is talking about the people back then, gods that they did not know. Back then, there was no Jesus, there was no Muhammad, there was no nothing. All there was like literal idolatry, like little statues or giant statues. And then there was the truth of the Torah. God gave the Jews a Torah at Mount Sinai, and a massive revelation of millions of people, so big the entire world knew about it. So big that like over like 1,000 or 2,000 miles away, Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, he heard about it or saw it, or somehow he knew in Midian, and he came all the way to Mount Sinai. And somehow some of the liars have convinced people, billions and billions of people, both Christianity and Islam, that one guy, God sent one guy to refute the truth that he revealed to the entire world. I mean, logically, there's so much about every other religion that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. None. Like, you think if God was gonna, God forbid, change his mind, you think he's really gonna like do something like minusculely less compared to like when he sealed his covenant with the Jews? He's like just gonna change his mind, and then here's this one guy that if you read my first, my only book, the 5 books of Moses, if you read it, this next guy, no one's gonna believe it, which is what happened. All the Jews couldn't get enough followers for hundreds of years. Like none of the barely any Jews would listen to any of the nonsense that they had to say, so they went to the rest of the Goyim. I mean, it even says it in the New Testament, to the Jew first, then to the Gentile. I mean, it's kind of weird how all 3 major religions put a huge weight on a Jew. Like, they have more value than the Goyim. Like, not just in Judaism, but in Christianity and even in Islam. Like, the whole point is to get the Jews. It's only that the Torah wants to get them to follow God's will and go to heaven, and everyone else is trying to either murder their bodies or murder their souls. Gods which you or your forefathers did not know. Baruch Hashem, this week is Parashat Shoftim. Every single week, even though every week there's just piles of evidence, mountains and mountains, that everything that we knew, we inherited falsehood. Please teach us the truth. This week there's massive proof of everything is lies except for the Torah and the tradition of the Jewish sages. Everyone always asks, like a lot of people, everyone that doesn't follow the Torah has such a huge problem with the Talmud and the rabbis and the Pharisees and the amazing thing about like how serious the asher trees and the pillars. Moses just got done mentioning it in last week's Torah portion in Deuteronomy chapter 13. And this week's Torah portion opens up with the same thing. Chapter 16, verses 21 and 22. Destroy all the asher trees and all the pillars. God literally says he hates them. (16:21). You shall not plant an asher tree near the altar of HaShem your God. And 22, neither shall you set up any pillar which HaShem your God hates. Chapter 17, verse 2 through 7. By the worst verse, get the death penalty. There's the commentary on this, like not the death penalty for the idol worshippers, but right after that. In chapter 17, verses 8 through 13. The commentary in the Chumash is just amazing. Just so wonderful. And if any of this, if any of this is cutting you really hard, which hopefully, if you haven't accepted the truth yet, hopefully it is, but it gets better. Eventually, the lemon juice in the paper cut goes away, and you just love it. It's the best. I gotta get some water. I will, with God's help, be back in a second. Okay. How you guys doing? Are you still there? I know these are long, but sometimes they get kind of boring for a little bit. We gotta focus. There's no way to learn anything unless we dig down and do a lot of work. Where were we? Chapter 17, verses 8 through 13. A rebellious elder. I might have to go get the Chumash because it's just the commentary is too great. Okay, we're going to start with verse 8. If there arise a matter too hard for you in judgment, between blood and blood, between plea and plea, and between plague and plague, matters of controversy within your gates, then you shall arise and go to the place which HaShem your God shall choose. And you shall come to the priests, to the Levites, and to the judge that shall be in those days, and inquire, and they shall tell you the sentence of the judgment. To the Kohen. That's what the Hebrew word for priest is Kohen. Go to the Kohanim, the Levi, and to the judge. HaShofet, the judge. That's what Shoftim is, judges. You shall appoint judges. I think we're hopefully going to go over this again either sometime soon this week. There's an awesome post by Rabbi Victor Miller that just goes with this too great. And you shall do according to the sentence which they of that place which the Lord shall choose shall tell you. And you shall observe to do according to all that they inform you, according to the sentence of the Torah which they shall tell you, and according to the judgment which they shall tell you, you shall do. You shall not deviate from the sentence which they tell you to the right or to the left. And the man that will act presumptuously and will not hearken to the Kohen, the priest, that stands to minister before the Lord your God, or to the judge, that man shall die, and you shall put away the evil from Israel. And all the people shall hear and fear and do no more presumptuously. The reason why is if everyone just reads the 5 books of Moses and decides their own law and how it's going to be applied on their own, there would be literally one Torah for every single human being, and God cannot have that. So obviously God is not reckless and insane. So he's going to establish a law to where he gives power to the Kohanim, to the priests, to the Levites, and to the judges that shall be in those days, which means right now and throughout all time, to settle matters of dispute. And anyone that goes against them gets the death penalty. And the people shall hear it. And they shall fear. And do no more presumptuously. This passage contains a whole lot of stuff, and like understanding for anyone that's like really looking for the truth, to like why the sages in the Talmud, why the rabbis said and did a lot of the stuff that they did. God gave them the authority. There's a lot of stuff if people just like jump into the ocean and start reading, but they just can't comprehend because like it's just too vast. I mean, not even a Jew just does that. They learn with a rabbi that's going to guide them, like you learn this first and then that and then this, to learn it in the right way so you understand what's going on. But the ultimate thing to know is that God, doesn't matter if we understand or not, God gave them the authority. And they toiled in God's Torah and his law for their entire lives, most of them. Like literally their entire, like all day, like 8 to 20 hours a day, most of them for more than that. Like most of them, 8 hours is not enough. They want like no sleep, just Torah, nothing else, for 40, 60, 80 years at least. And since they toiled in it and they followed it, God gave them the wisdom to understand it and the authority to make the rulings that they did. And if we don't accept that, then we are Amalek. Baruch Hashem, I am slowly working my way away from that point. May God help us all to get completely away. 100%. The complete opposite of Amalek. Which is Israel. Not the state. The people. Every week is just so great. Start reading. Have some mercy on yourself. Start reading and start watching lectures by Rabbi Reuven. Click a link in the description. And ask God to show you the truth. And to help you follow it. It will do that. If you help me, he will certainly help anyone else. All it takes is a little bit of effort. And most importantly, the want. Are you sick? Are you sick of your life yet? The nonsense of scrolling through random weird YouTube videos. Okay, we're going to try to get a couple things done before we go to sleep. Hopefully this was successful. Help me. That's something. Talk to you guys soon.